Welcome to Uncovered Biblical History and Traditions, the channel dedicated to lost stories of the biblical past. Discover stories of pre-Christian historical roots, biblical legends, lost church history, and forgotten historical characters of faith. It is very helpful if you hit the like, subscribe, and share. Help build my channel, and let's take a look together into these uncovered forgotten tales. Imagine this: a childless nomad, nearly 100 years old, stands under a star-filled Middle Eastern sky around 4,000 years ago. The creator of the universe has just made him promises so vast, so impossible, that they would require his descendants to become some of the most populous nations on earth. This isn't mythology or legend, this is the beginning of a documented covenant that scholars argue has literally reshaped world demographics, created royal dynasties, and continues to influence global politics today. Today, we're diving deep into one of history's most audacious promises, the Abrahamic Covenant. Our story begins with a man named Abram, later called Abraham, who received what biblical scholars consider the most comprehensive set of divine promises ever recorded in human history. But these weren't just spiritual platitudes, they were specific, measurable, and according to researchers, have been systematically fulfilled across millennia. The covenant didn't emerge all at once. Instead, it unfolded through a series of increasingly detailed revelations that would challenge everything we think we know about demographics, politics, and world history. Each promise built upon the previous ones, creating what amounts to a prophetic blueprint for global development. What makes this particularly fascinating is that these promises were made to a man who, despite his advanced age, had no children. Yet the commitments were so specific that their fulfillment would require nothing less than the creation of some of Earth's largest population groups and most powerful nations. The first major expansion of Abraham's covenant came when God instructed him to look in all four directions from where he stood. In that moment, according to Genesis chapter 13 verses 14 to 16, Abraham received a promise that would boggle the mind: "For all the land which you see I will give to you and your descendants forever. I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if one can count the dust of the earth, your descendants also can be counted." Think about that metaphor for a moment. Dust of the earth. Not just a large family, not even a substantial tribe, but numbers comparable to particles of dust covering the planet. Scholars who take this literally argue that such a promise could only be fulfilled if Abraham's descendants eventually included some of the most heavily populated nations on earth. The covenant deepened dramatically in Genesis chapter 15, when God approached Abraham with both comfort and challenge. The divine declaration was profound: "Fear not, Abram, I am your shield, your reward shall be very great." Here was a man who had received incredible promises about his future descendants, yet he remained childless. In a moment of raw honesty that reveals his humanity, Abraham essentially challenged God: "Behold, thou hast given me no offspring." He wondered aloud whether these promises might be fulfilled through an adopted heir rather than a biological child. God's response was both categorical and theatrical. He rejected the adoption option entirely, then brought Abraham outside under the night sky for one of history's most dramatic object lessons. "This man, an adopted heir, shall not be your heir, your own son shall be your heir." And he, God, brought him outside and said, "Look toward heaven, and number the stars. If you are able to number them, so shall your descendants be." Two metaphors now: dust of the earth and stars of heaven. Both represent quantities that are, for practical purposes, uncountable. Demographic researchers who study this covenant argue that its literal fulfillment would require Abraham's descendants to develop into multiple nations, not just one large country, but several of the world's most populous societies. What's remarkable is Abraham's response. Despite having no children and being advanced in age, he believed. This faith in promises that extended far beyond his lifetime has been cited as one of the most extraordinary examples of long-term thinking in human history. But the covenant wasn't all promise and blessing. In one of the most sobering prophetic visions ever recorded, Abraham learned there would be a dark side to his descendants' role in divine history. During what's described as a horror of great darkness, Abraham received a chilling preview of his lineage's future. The prophecy was devastatingly specific. Know of a surety that your descendants will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be slaves there, and they will be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation which they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. 400 years. To put that in perspective, that's longer than the entire history of the United States. Imagine being told that your descendants would suffer systematic oppression for longer than America has existed, spanning multiple centuries and countless generations. Yet even this dark prophecy contained promises, divine judgment on the oppressing nation and ultimate liberation accompanied by great wealth. Historical researchers point to the Israelite experience in Egypt as the primary fulfillment of this prophecy, centuries of slavery followed by a dramatic exodus where the former slaves departed with substantial Egyptian wealth after a series of devastating plagues struck their oppressors. Following the dark vision came another territorial promise that would make any modern geopolitical strategist take notice. God promised Abraham, "To your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates." This wasn't just the land of Canaan anymore. This was an empire stretching from Egypt to Mesopotamia, encompassing what today includes Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and portions of Iraq and Egypt. This territory controlled major ancient trade routes and included some of the most fertile and strategic land in the ancient world. The covenant reached its climax when Abraham was 99 years old, an age when most people are thinking about their legacy, not their future. What happened next was described as an awesome series of blessings, received in a face-to-face encounter with the Creator of the universe. God began with a familiar theme: "I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly." Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him. The phrase, "fell on his face," indicates the overwhelming nature of this divine encounter. But this time, God went further than ever before. He announced, "Behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of a multitude of nations, not one nation, not even a few large tribes, but a multitude of nations." The scope was staggering. To reflect this destiny, God changed the man's name from Abram to Abraham, explaining, "For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations." Note the tense, "I have made you," past tense, as if it were already accomplished, despite Abraham still having no children. The promises continued: "I will make you exceedingly fruitful. Will make nations of you, and kings shall come forth from you, multiple nations, royal dynasties, political power on a global scale, all from one childless nomad." Then came the eternal aspect. "Will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your descendants after you." This wasn't just for Abraham's lifetime or even his children's generation, it was forever. What makes this covenant particularly fascinating to researchers is the perspective gap it reveals between divine and human thinking. God spoke of these promises as accomplished facts even when Abraham had no children. This illustrates what scholars call the eternal perspective. When you exist outside of time, future events are as certain as past ones. This creates what researchers term the perspective problem. Humans, with their limited lifespans, want immediate results. We think in terms of years or decades. But the Abrahamic Covenant operates on a scale of millennia. Abraham's extraordinary faith lay partly in his ability to think beyond his own lifetime and trust in promises that would take centuries to fulfill. Here's where the story gets really interesting for modern audiences. Covenant researchers argue that history has systematically validated these ancient promises. They point to evidence that Abraham's descendants have indeed become some of the major nations of the earth, that royal dynasties have emerged from his lineage, and that some of his offspring continue to occupy thrones in modern nations. The demographic argument is particularly compelling. For the dust of the earth and stars of heaven metaphors to be literally fulfilled, Abraham's descendants would need to include some of the most populous nations on the planet. Researchers argue that this is exactly what we see when we trace his lineage through history. The political promises have also seen remarkable fulfillment. Multiple royal dynasties have claimed descent from Abraham, and several continue to this day. The promise that kings shall come forth from you has been realized across different cultures and time periods. What makes the Abrahamic Covenant relevant today isn't just its historical claims, but its ongoing implications. The eternal nature of the territorial promises continues to influence land disputes and international relations. From a faith perspective, the covenant's historical track record provides what supporters see as compelling evidence for trusting future biblical promises. If God kept these specific, measurable commitments over millennia, it suggests reliability for other biblical predictions about the future. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Abrahamic Covenant is how a series of promises made to one childless nomad 4,000 years ago continued to shape world events today. The precision of its fulfillment, the scope of its promises, and the duration of its influence make it unique in human history. It challenges our assumptions about time, planning, and the relationship between faith and evidence. As we face our own global challenges and uncertainties, perhaps there's something to be learned from Abraham's example, the willingness to embrace promises that extend far beyond our own lifetimes, and the faith to believe that some commitments are reliable enough to stake everything on, even when their fulfillment seems impossible. The Abrahamic Covenant reminds us that sometimes the most important promises take millennia to fulfill, but when they do, they reshape the world. If you would like further context and the rest of the story, check out previous videos and future videos. If you would like more information where to research this subject, pause this image and look into these resources or find resources in description. If you have book sources or links of your own on this subject, please share in comments or email me. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this forgotten biblical story. Leave a like, comment, share and subscribe. This is very helpful. Join me next time for another lost story of our biblical history. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.